Hey guys, this is a guide for soloing Heroic Algeth'ar Academy on Frost DK. The build I use to solo this dungeon is an obliteration build with dual wield weapons, and both of the weapons have the Fallen Crusader enchant on them for healing. The stat priority is going to be versatility over crit, and for our class-based talents, we'll be focused on as many talents that will increase our survivability as possible. The gear I did this at is item level 478, so if you're a solo player, you shouldn't have to worry too much about not being able to get the gear in order to complete this. The first boss is the Overgrown Ancient, and he has three mechanics that you'll have to worry about. The first one is an attack called Bark Breaker, and he's going to cast this attack that will apply a debuff to you, and this debuff will cause you to take 100% increased physical damage. This debuff will last 9 seconds, but it won't be up on us the whole fight, and in order to survive this, we'll be utilizing the downtime when it's not on us to stockpile as much resources and runic power as possible, so that when it is applied to us, we'll have the ability to use as many death strikes as we need to in order to survive the duration of the debuff. Make sure that before this debuff is applied that you have as much health as possible, and that's so that you can accommodate the large damage spikes and be able to time when you can use Death Strike in order to heal the most amount of healing from Death Strike's 5-second rule as possible. The second mechanic is a add summon mechanic, and the add is called the Ancient Branch. This add will attempt to cast a heal on itself or other adds throughout the fight. The best way to deal with this is to interrupt the heal and to burst down this add as fast as possible. The reason we'll prioritize killing these adds is because the boss will continue to summon these adds regardless of if you've killed the last one or not, and they will stack up and overwhelm you if you haven't killed them fast enough. In order to kill these adds, we'll be using the obliteration combo, which is Remorseless Winter, Death and Decay, and Pillar of Frost, in order to kill them and all adds surrounding the target. The third mechanic is another add summon, and he'll be summoning a bunch of smaller adds throughout the course of the fight. These adds aren't too big of an issue, and that's because they don't do too much damage on their own, but if you haven't killed them fast enough, they will stack up and cause trouble later on in the fight if you get too many of them up at one time. We'll be dealing with these adds by weaving in as many frost sites as we can when we can in order to keep them at bay or kill as many as we can when possible. Note that it might be prudent for you to hold on to some of these adds at low health so that you'll be able to get Death Strike procs off of them once you kill them. So you might want to time when these things die in order to hold on to some health for later on in the fight when you may need it. That's all you'll need to know for the Overgrown Ancient fight, and the only other thing that I can think to mention is to be wise about how much runes you're spending and when you're spending them, so that you aren't gassed out when you need the runes or the runic power at a time when you don't have them. Also, make sure to avoid the swirlies. The second boss in this dungeon is Krath, and Krath has two major mechanics that you'll need to worry about, and some minor mechanics that are conal effects. The conal effects are simple enough, so we'll cover them first, and they are going to take place in front of the boss, and you'll just need to sidestep them when they occur. The boss will also cast Firestorm throughout the course of the fight, and you'll just avoid the red swirlies when they appear. The first of the major mechanics that we'll need to cover is called Savage Peck, and this is a bleed debuff that the boss will apply to you over the course of the fight. This bleed debuff has pretty high uptime, so you won't be able to counter it too much with Death Strike, but if you are going to use Death Strike at any point in this fight, it would probably be prudent for you to try to use it during the duration of Savage Peck. The damage profile of this boss is pretty consistent damage, so you'll want to maximize your healing by getting more Death Strikes rather than timing your Death Strikes for major damage events. Having said that, there are points when the boss will spike your health, so you'll want to save at least a little bit of runic power so that you have the Death Strikes when you need to use them. Our goal here for Death Strikes is mostly quantity over quality of Death Strike. The second mechanic is a mechanic called Play Ball, and this is basically a bunch of orbs being summoned throughout the ring that you're fighting the boss on, and you'll have to collect 3 of these orbs and bring them over to one of the goals that are on the opposite sides of each other on the ring. Collecting 3 of these orbs and bringing them over to our desired goal will give us a bonus depending on which one we choose to put the goals in. The bonus that I chose is the red goal, and I'll be choosing this one for 2 reasons. The first is that it will summon a firestorm that we can use to generate a bunch of extra runic power with anti-magic shell by walking into the firestorm and blocking it with anti-magic shell. The second is that it will stun the boss and make the boss take extra damage from our attacks during the duration of the stun. And during this duration, we'll be using the Obliteration Remorseless Winter combo in order to do as much damage as we can while we can, and while the boss is susceptible to taking extra damage. However, you may decide that you want to pick the opposite goal that I picked, and that's because the opposite goal will give you a haste buff for a short time that will increase your haste and give you a bunch more healing and a bunch more Death Strikes, so that if you are worried about dying, you'll be a little bit safer with that buff instead of the goal that I picked. This is all you'll need to know for the Karth fight. The only other thing that I can think of is that the boss has a lot of casts that he needs to stand and stop attacking you for, or stop moving for. And if you really need to, you can use these casts in order to kite and press Howling Blast at a range in order to generate some extra runic power in case you're worried about not being able to survive. Veximus is the third boss in the dungeon, and he has two mechanics that you'll have to worry about. The first is called Arcane Orbs, and Arcane Orbs are a mechanic that will spawn a bunch of orbs throughout the room that will slowly crawl towards Veximus. If the orbs reach Veximus, they will give Veximus a bunch of energy that he'll use to do damage to you, and in order to avoid this, we'll be running into the orbs and body blocking them so that they don't touch Veximus. The orbs themselves will do damage once you run into them, so you may want to stockpile some resources and runic power in order to heal the damage that you take once you run into them. This boss doesn't do a lot of consistent damage, so you'll have a lot of time to stockpile these resources in between these phases. Our goal here is to have lots of runic power so that we can run through all the orbs and spam Death Strike once we need to after we've eliminated all of the orbs. The second mechanic is Arcane Explosion, and this is a frontal cone effect that you can't really avoid because he tracks you with it, and it's basically a large burst that will do a bunch of damage to your health once he's finished casting it. We'll counter this by holding onto a little bit of extra runic power, just like we were with the orb mechanics, so that we can heal once the cast is complete and we take the spike damage from Arcane Explosion. Veximus is a pretty easy boss for Death Knights, and that's because both of his mechanics are magic damage and can be stopped or absorbed by anti-magic shell and give the Death Knight a bunch of extra resources for healing. He also does a lot of spike damage, and this spike damage can be countered pretty easily with Death Strike. A good way to look at this fight is to see it as a Death Strike fight that revolves around the quality of your Death Strike rather than the quantity of your Death Strikes. This is all you'll need to know. The only other thing is that you should avoid the puddles and avoid the swirlies when they occur.
Any arcane orbs? Veximus did not absorb any arcane orbs. Tried its best to defeat the dragons. It was
Echo of Dorogosa is the last boss in the dungeon, and it's by far the easiest. The only thing that you'll have to do for this boss is to manage your health and avoid the effects that he'll place on the ground. There is a little bit of spike damage to this fight, so you might want to hold on to a little bit of resources so that you can Death Strike when you need to, but for the most part this boss is mostly just tank and spank, and he'll fall over so long as you're not AFK. He also has a conal effect, so make sure to sidestep that whenever he casts it. He has a mechanic that will apply stacks to you that will be removed naturally through his other mechanics, so you don't really have to worry too much about it. And if things get too hairy, all of his damage is mostly magic damage, so you should be able to use Arcane Shell in order to avoid or absorb the damage. This is all you'll need to know for this fight, and it's also the end of the commentary for the dungeon, so the rest of the video is going to be the rest of the fight. And I hope that this video was able to help solo players solo Algeth'ar Academy, or at least increase a little bit of interest into soloing, as soloing is a really rewarding experience that I hope I can at least provide a little bit of light on and increase a little bit of interest in, as it is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting parts of World of Warcraft.
Demerit points for you! Go to the corner! Demerit points for you! Think about what you have done! Poor marks for poor students! You will not pass the semester! Poor marks for poor students! Learn from this! Poor marks for poor students! You will not pass the semester! Poor marks for poor students! Think about what you have done! Demerit points for you! Go to the corner! Demerit points for you! Think about what you have done! Poor marks for poor students! You will not pass the semester! Demerit points for you! Think about what you have done! Demerit points for you!
Oh dear,